Listen to me carefully. Nobody warns you that one day, the healthiest thing you can do is disappear for a while. Not disappear because you are weak, not disappear because you have failed, and not disappear because you want people to chase you, notice you, or regret losing access to you. Disappear because you can no longer hear yourself. You have been available for everyone. You have answered the messages, carried the conversations, absorbed the moods, explained your choices, softened your truth, and kept showing up even when something inside you was asking for silence. You have been so visible to the world that you have become invisible to yourself, and you already know this. You know it in the strange exhaustion that sleep does not fix. You know it when a room full of people makes you feel more alone than an empty room. And you know it when somebody asks, "How are you?" and you automatically give them the version of yourself that requires the least explanation. You know it when you reach for your phone the moment the room becomes quiet. Carl Jung understood that the human being can become divided against himself. Jung explained that we build a social face, a mask necessary for life, a role that helps us belong, work, survive, and be understood. He called this the persona. The persona is not evil. You need one. But the problem begins when the mask becomes so convincing that you forget there is a face beneath it. You become the reliable one, the funny one, the strong one, the successful one, the easygoing one, the one who never needs too much. And little by little, you begin living as if the world's image of you is more real than your own inner experience. That is when disappearing becomes necessary, not as punishment, not as a dramatic escape, and not as a performance for social media, but as a return. Because there is a part of you that has been left behind in every conversation where you pretended, in every obligation you accepted while your body said no, in every relationship where you kept the peace by abandoning your own needs, and in every ambition you pursued because it looked impressive even though it made your soul feel cold. Carl Jung believed that the real task of a life is not simply to adapt to society. It is to become whole. Jung called this process individuation, the difficult, sacred work of becoming the person you actually are rather than the person you were trained to perform. But individuation has a cost. You cannot become yourself while constantly being watched by people who need you to remain who you used to be. You cannot hear your deeper voice while every notification, opinion, expectation, demand, and comparison is speaking louder than it, and you cannot rebuild your inner house while strangers are still walking through every room. So perhaps this feeling is not laziness. Perhaps it is not antisocial. Perhaps it is not you falling behind, and perhaps your psyche is calling you home. And if you have felt the urge to pull back, to become quiet, to stop explaining, to spend time alone, and to leave certain rooms without announcing it, do not dismiss that feeling too quickly. Sometimes the part of you that wants to disappear is not trying to destroy your life. It is trying to save it. There is a kind of exhaustion that comes from work, and you can rest from that. But there is another kind that comes from being emotionally overexposed, and that kind of exhaustion follows you into sleep. It is the fatigue of being too accessible, too interpretable, too available, too responsive. You wake up, and before you have even met yourself for the day, you have already met everyone else. Their messages, their opinions, their demands, their emergencies, their carefully edited lives, their disappointments, their celebrations, and their expectations of who you should be. And then you wonder why your mind feels crowded, why you cannot focus, why joy feels distant, and why even your private moments feel like they are being evaluated by an invisible audience. Carl Jung warned, in his own way, about the danger of collective thinking. Jung understood that society does not merely influence you from the outside. It can enter your mind, shape your values, and convince you that a borrowed life is your own. You begin to measure yourself through the eyes of people who do not know your inner world. You count your worth through attention. You confuse being needed with being loved, being seen with being known, and noise with connection. But being visible is not the same as being understood, and being surrounded is not the same as being held. This is why you can be admired and still feel empty, why you can have friends and still feel unseen, and why you can receive praise for a version of yourself that secretly feels like a prison. Jung's idea of the persona becomes painfully relevant here. The persona begins as clothing. It helps you enter the world. But if you sleep in armor long enough, you forget what it feels like to breathe. Imagine a fortress built to protect a city. At first, the walls are useful, they keep danger out, they offer structure, and they create safety. But then the gates never open. No sunlight reaches the center, no fresh air enters, and no one inside remembers what the horizon looks like. The fortress that once protected life begins to imprison it. That is what can happen to the identity you have built. You learned to be strong because being vulnerable once felt dangerous. You learned to be useful because usefulness earned you approval. You learned to be funny because humor made pain easier to carry. You learned to be independent because relying on others led to disappointment. And you learned to be agreeable because conflict made you fear abandonment. None of this means you are fake. It means you adapted. But adaptation is not always truth. Carl Jung understood that what you repress does not disappear. Jung said, in essence, that what remains unconscious will direct your life, and you may call it fate. The grief you never allowed yourself to feel does not vanish, the anger you swallowed does not evaporate, and the dream you betrayed does not stop calling your name simply because you became busy. It goes underground, and underground things gather power. That is why you may suddenly feel irritated by people you love, why small requests feel unbearable, why a harmless message feels invasive, and why you fantasize about turning off your phone, leaving town, deleting everything, changing your name, and beginning again where no one expects anything from you. You are not always trying to run away from life. Sometimes you are trying to run back toward yourself. There is an important difference. Running away is driven by panic. It says, I need to escape my feelings. Withdrawing consciously is driven by wisdom. It says, I need enough silence to finally feel what is true. Carl Jung did not romanticize isolation. Jung knew that the psyche can be a dark forest, and that solitude can reveal things you would rather avoid. But Jung also understood that the unconscious does not speak clearly in a life filled with constant distraction. It speaks through dreams, through recurring emotions, through the strange heaviness that appears when you are on the wrong path, through envy that points toward an unlived possibility, through anger that reveals a boundary you failed to protect, and through boredom that tells you your soul has outgrown the room you are still sitting in. You feel it, don't you? You feel the gap between the life you are maintaining and the life that wants to emerge. You notice how often you perform certainty when you are actually confused, how often you say yes while resentment quietly grows behind your ribs, and how some people only seem comfortable with you when you are exhausted, accommodating, predictable, and easy to access. And you may have noticed something even harder. When you begin to change, some people do not ask whether you are okay. They ask why you are different. Because your old role served them, your availability served them, your silence served them, and your lack of boundaries served them. And when you stop offering those things, they may call you distant, cold, selfish, arrogant, or changed. Maybe you have changed. Maybe that is the point. Jung understood that growth often feels like betrayal to the people who benefited from your old limitations, not because you are trying to hurt them, but because you are no longer willing to hurt yourself in order to keep them comfortable. This is where many people turn back. They feel guilty, they return too quickly, they apologize for needing space, they make their transformation easy for everyone else to digest, they explain every boundary until the boundary becomes a negotiation, and they announce every private decision until the decision is no longer private. Then they wonder why nothing changes. You cannot heal in the same emotional environment where you are constantly pressured to remain unhealed. You cannot meet your authentic self while you are continually auditioning for acceptance. There are seasons when you must let people misunderstand you, seasons when your growth will not look graceful from the outside, and seasons when you must become less available in order to become more alive. Think of a seed under the soil. From above, it looks as if nothing is happening. It is hidden. It has vanished, and it is absent from the visible world. But beneath the surface, the seed is breaking open. Its old form is being destroyed. Roots are searching through darkness, and a new structure is forming where nobody can applaud it. And if the seed could speak, perhaps it would say, "I have not disappeared. I am becoming capable of growth." Your private season may look like that. Less talking, less posting, less explaining, less reacting, more walking, more reading, more writing, more sleeping, more prayer if prayer belongs to you, more honest conversations with yourself, more attention to the dream you had 3 nights in a row, and more respect for the quiet voice that has been trying to reach you beneath the noise. Carl Jung believed dreams were not meaningless fragments. Jung saw them as communications from the unconscious, a counterweight to the narrow conscious attitude you carry during the day. If your waking life is filled with performance, your dreams may become more insistent. If you ignore your sadness, it may arrive in symbols. If you betray your deepest values, your inner world may begin to feel chaotic. Your psyche does not always shout first. At first, it whispers, then it repeats, and then it creates consequences. You may lose interest in what once excited you. You may feel tired around people who once felt familiar. You may feel a strange pull toward solitude, and you may experience the painful realization that your life is full, but not fulfilled. And this is the point where you have to become honest. Not dramatic. Honest. You do not need to destroy every relationship. You do not need to quit your job tomorrow, and you do not need to disappear without care, without responsibility, or without a word to those who truly depend on you. But you may need to stop giving unlimited access to a version of you that no longer exists. You may need to leave the inner courtroom where you have spent years defending your right to be a person. You may need to step away long enough to remember what you think when nobody is telling you what to think. Because the deepest danger is not that people will leave when you change. The deepest danger is that you will stay the same just to keep them. This matters now because a life can be lost gradually, not through one catastrophic decision, but through 1,000 tiny betrayals. Every time you ignore your exhaustion because someone might be disappointed, every time you make yourself smaller so another person will not feel threatened, every time you remain reachable because silence makes you feel guilty, every time you call self-abandonment being kind, every time you call emotional starvation being loyal, and every time you confuse a familiar cage with a meaningful life. Carl Jung understood that the unlived life does not remain neutral. Jung believed the disowned parts of the self return in symptoms, projections, compulsions, bitterness, and despair. What you refuse to face inside can begin to shape your relationships, your work, your health, and your choices. If you never disappear consciously, you may disappear unconsciously. You may vanish into distractions, into addictions, into endless scrolling, into relationships that consume you, into work that gives you applause but no peace, and into a life so busy that you never have to ask the terrifying question, "Is this actually mine?" That is the turning point. Not next year, not after everyone finally understands you, and not after your schedule becomes perfect. Now, because time has a way of making avoidance look normal. A month becomes a year becomes a decade, and one day you look at a life you carefully built and realize you were never fully inside it. Do not wait until resentment becomes your personality. Do not wait until burnout becomes your identity. Do not wait until your body has to force you to stop because your mind refused to listen. You need a pause before the collapse. You need silence before the breakdown, and you need to disappear for a while before you become a stranger to yourself forever. Drop 111 in the comments right now. I choose to return to myself before I lose myself. Write it and let that decision become real. But disappearing does not mean disappearing recklessly. It does not mean punishing people with silence. It does not mean isolating yourself in despair. It does not mean becoming cruel, unreachable, or indifferent. And it does not mean abandoning responsibilities that are genuinely yours. A conscious retreat is not rejection of life. It is preparation for a truer life. Carl Jung's work gives us a powerful way to understand this. Jung believed transformation requires a relationship with the unconscious, with the shadow, and with the authentic center of the personality he called the self. You cannot build that relationship if every moment belongs to the crowd. So if you need to disappear for a while, do it with purpose. There are 5 movements in a real inner retreat. The first is called close the gates. The second is called remove the mask. The third is called meet the shadow. The fourth is called build the inner house. And the fifth is called return with boundaries. Close the gates means reducing access to your attention, not forever, but long enough to create psychological space. Remove the mask means noticing who you become around others and asking whether that role still represents you. Meet the shadow means facing the emotions, desires, fears, and truths you have pushed away because they did not fit your image. Build the inner house means creating practices, rhythms, values, and relationships that make your inner life stable. Return with boundaries means coming back to the world without surrendering the self you found in silence. This can change everything. What if solitude is not proof that you are unwanted, but the place where you stop abandoning yourself? What if your need for distance is not a flaw, but an intelligence your life has been trying to give you? What if you do not need to become a different person at all? What if you simply need to remove the layers that were never you? Jung's psychology is not about becoming perfect. Jung understood that wholeness is different from perfection. Wholeness includes light and darkness, strength and weakness, certainty and confusion. It includes the parts of you that are beautiful and the parts you have been ashamed to admit exist. That is why this process can feel frightening. When you disappear from the noise, you meet the person underneath the performance, and that person may have needs, may be angry, may be grieving, and may want a life you have been too afraid to claim. But that person is also where your energy is, your creativity, your courage, your real voice, and your direction. Drop 444 in the comments if this speaks to you. I trust the quiet season that is rebuilding me. Write it slowly. You are not disappearing from your life. You are returning to its center. The first movement is this: close the gates. A gate is not a wall. A wall says, no one can ever reach me. A gate says, I decide what enters. That difference matters. Many people try to heal by cutting everyone off in a moment of pain. They disappear with rage. They make silence into a weapon. But Carl Jung's path was not about impulsive destruction. Jung understood that real transformation requires consciousness. You must know why you are stepping back. So begin by asking yourself, what has too much access to me? Is it your phone? Is it a person who expects instant replies? Is it social media, where you compare your unfinished life to everyone else's performance? Is it a family system that treats your boundaries as betrayal? Is it work that has invaded every hour of your day? Is it the internal voice that keeps demanding you prove your worth? Close the gates around what drains your attention without giving your soul anything in return. You do not have to announce it. You do not have to create a dramatic farewell, and you can simply become less available. Turn off non-essential notifications. Delay your responses. Protect the first hour of your morning from other people's voices. Protect the last hour of your night from comparison. Choose one day each week when you do not perform your life for an audience, and stop reporting every inner change before it has had the chance to take root. Jung understood that psychic energy is precious. Jung used the language of libido more broadly than sexual desire. For him, it was life energy, the force that moves attention, desire, imagination, and action. When your energy leaks into 100 small obligations, you may have nothing left for the work your soul is asking of you. You do not need more motivation first. You may need fewer leaks. Imagine carrying water through a desert in a cracked vessel. You can walk faster, strain harder, and blame yourself for being tired. But if the vessel keeps leaking, effort alone will not save you. Your attention is that water. Your life force is that water. Every compulsive check, every unnecessary explanation, every relationship where you must betray yourself to belong, and every argument you keep replaying in your mind. These are cracks in the vessel. Close the gates. Repair the vessel. Let your energy remain with you long enough for it to become strength. A practical beginning can be simple. For 7 days, do not answer every message immediately. For 7 days, take a walk without headphones. For 7 days, write down the moments when you feel your body tighten around a person, a task, or a request. For 7 days, ask before saying yes. What will this cost me? Not everything that costs energy is wrong. Love costs energy. Purpose costs energy. Creation costs energy. But self-betrayal costs more. Your affirmation for this movement is simple. My attention is sacred, and I choose where it goes. The second movement is this. Remove the mask. Carl Jung wrote extensively about the persona because Jung knew social identity can become a trap. The persona is the face you present to the world. It is the version of you designed to function, gain approval, avoid rejection, and make your place in society. Again, the persona is not the enemy. The danger is believing it is your entire identity. Ask yourself, who am I when I am trying to be liked? Who am I when I am trying not to disappoint anyone? Who am I when I am afraid someone will leave? Who am I when I am trying to look successful? Who am I when I am trying to look unaffected? You may discover that you have several masks. The caretaker mask says, I will solve everyone's problems, so nobody notices I have needs too. The achiever mask says, if I accomplish enough, I will finally deserve rest. The invisible mask says, if I ask for nothing, nobody can reject me. The rebel mask says, if I reject everyone first, nobody can control me. The spiritual mask says, if I appear peaceful, I will not have to admit I am angry. The strong mask says, if I never break down, nobody can use my weakness against me. These masks formed for reasons. Respect that. Do not hate the person you had to become to survive, but do not force that survivor to run your entire life. Jung understood that maturity requires more than social adaptation. Jung believed you must gradually differentiate yourself from the roles handed to you by family, culture, fear, and expectation. You have to ask, is this truly me, or is this a strategy that once kept me safe? This question can feel dangerous because the mask may have brought you praise. People may love your reliability, admire your toughness, depend on your availability, and compliment your ambition. But applause is not always recognition. Sometimes people are applauding the very mask that is suffocating you. Removing the mask does not mean telling every stranger your deepest wounds. Authenticity is not oversharing. It is alignment. It means your outer behavior is no longer constantly at war with your inner truth. You begin with small acts. Say, I cannot do that this week, without inventing a dramatic excuse. Say, I need time to think, instead of agreeing under pressure. Say, that did not sit right with me when something hurts. Admit, I am tired. Admit, I do not know. Admit, I have changed my mind. These sentences may seem ordinary, but if you have spent your life performing a role, they are revolutionary. The world may resist your honesty at first. That is normal. The persona trained people to expect a certain version of you. When you remove the mask, they may try to hand it back. Do not take it automatically. Pause. Feel the weight of it. Ask whether it still belongs to you. Your affirmation for this movement is, I release the role that kept me accepted but kept me unseen. The third movement is this, meet the shadow. This is where many people turn away. Carl Jung's idea of the shadow is often misunderstood. The shadow is not simply your evil side. Jung described it as the aspects of yourself that your conscious identity rejects, hides, or refuses to recognize. It can contain anger, envy, fear, selfishness, aggression, shame, and grief. But it can also contain courage you were told was arrogance, Ambition you were taught to suppress, sensuality you were taught to fear, creativity you were told was impractical, leadership you were told was too much, and a voice you learned to silence. The shadow is not only darkness, it is unlived life. And when you disappear for a while, the shadow often comes to meet you. You may feel anger rising. Remember moments you thought you were over. Recognize that you resent people you have been trying desperately to please, or feel envy towards someone whose life reveals a possibility you abandoned. Do not panic. Jung understood that projection is one of the ways the shadow operates. We often see in other people what we cannot bear to see in ourselves. The person who irritates you may be revealing a quality you have disowned. The person you envy may be living a freedom you have not permitted yourself. The person you judge as selfish may be showing you the boundary you are afraid to set. This does not mean every reaction is your fault. Some people are genuinely harmful. Some situations are genuinely unjust. Shadow work is not an excuse to tolerate mistreatment. It is an invitation to ask a deeper question. What is this reaction trying to show me? If someone's confidence irritates you, perhaps you have been taught to distrust your own power. If someone's freedom makes you angry, perhaps you have imprisoned yourself in obligations that no longer fit. If someone's success fills you with bitterness, perhaps there is a dream in you that needs attention. If someone's neediness exhausts you, perhaps you have ignored your own needs for too long. The shadow becomes dangerous when denied. It becomes useful when faced. This requires honesty without cruelty. Do not say, "I am angry, therefore I should destroy everything." Say, "I am angry." What boundary, loss, insult, or abandoned truth is this anger protecting? Do not say, "I feel envy, therefore I am a bad person." Say, "I feel envy. What does it reveal about what I long for?" Do not say, "I am afraid, therefore I should hide." Say, "I am afraid. What meaningful risk is standing in front of me?" Carl Jung believed that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Jung's point was not that darkness is glamorous. It was that denial gives darkness control. The moment you name what is true, you begin to regain choice. Try this practice in your private season. Write 3 sentences each night. Today I felt most alive when. Today I felt most false when. Today I judged someone for. Then ask yourself, could there be a neglected part of me inside that judgment? Do not force an answer. Just listen. The shadow is like a locked basement in an old house. For years, you may have avoided it because you feared what was inside. But the basement contains more than monsters. It contains old photographs, forgotten tools, family history, buried grief, and perhaps the very resources you need to rebuild. You do not have to live in the basement. You simply have to stop pretending it is not part of the house. Your affirmation for this movement is, "I have the courage to face what I have hidden and reclaim what I have lost." The 4th movement is this: build the inner house. Disappearing for a while is not enough if you return to the same internal chaos. You need structure. You need a place inside yourself that feels inhabitable. Carl Jung's concept of the self points toward this deeper center. Jung distinguished the ego, the conscious I that navigates everyday life, from the self, which represents the larger totality of the psyche. The self is not your ego getting everything it wants. It is the organizing center of wholeness. When you live only from ego, you ask, how do I look? How do I win? How do I avoid failure? How do I stay in control? When you begin to listen to the self, different questions appear. What is trying to develop through me? What life is asking me to live? What truth am I avoiding? What would make me more whole, not merely more impressive? Building the inner house means creating conditions where you can hear those questions. Your inner house needs a foundation, and that foundation is your body. Sleep enough. Eat food that steadies you. Move your body regularly. Step outside. Notice the sky, and breathe before you react. These are not shallow self-care slogans. Your nervous system affects your capacity to reflect, choose, and regulate. A chronically overstimulated body makes every problem feel urgent. A depleted body cannot easily distinguish danger from discomfort. Your inner house needs rooms. Give different parts of you a place to exist. Have a room for work, where you create and build. Have a room for grief, where you stop pretending you are over what hurt you. Have a room for play, where you make something with no audience in mind. Have a room for silence, where you do not consume anyone else's thoughts. Have a room for honest friendship, where you can be known without performing. Your inner house needs rules. One rule may be, I do not make major decisions while emotionally flooded. Another may be, I do not answer disrespect with immediate access. Another may be, I do not sacrifice sleep to remain available to people who would not do the same for me. Another may be, I do not confuse urgency with importance. Another may be, I do not betray my long-term peace for short-term approval. Jung understood that the psyche seeks balance. Jung called attention to the way unconscious material can compensate for one-sided conscious attitudes. If your life is all work, the unconscious may demand play. If your life is all rationality, dreams may bring emotion and symbol. If your life is all service to others, your inner world may eventually demand a self that belongs to you. So build a life that does not require your psyche to scream for balance. Create a personal ritual. It can be 15 minutes in the morning with a notebook. It can be an evening walk without your phone. It can be sitting quietly with tea before anyone else has access to you. It can be reviewing your dreams when you wake up. It can be prayer. It can be meditation. It can be making art that no one will see. The ritual itself is not magic. Its repetition tells your mind, there is a place in this life where I am allowed to exist. That is powerful. Your affirmation for this movement is, I build a life that gives my true self somewhere to live. The fifth movement is this, return with boundaries. This is the part people often misunderstand. You disappear for a while, not so you can remain hidden forever, but so you can return without losing yourself again. The point is not isolation. The point is conscious connection. Carl Jung did not argue that you should abandon the world. Jung knew that individuation happens in relationship as well as solitude. Other people challenge you, mirror you, frustrate you, reveal you, and give you chances to practice the person you are becoming. But when you return differently. Return with a gate, not an open wound. Return with clarity, not apology. Return with kindness, not self-erasure. Return with limits. You do not need to explain every change. I am taking some space can be enough. You do not need to argue people into respecting your boundary. A boundary is not a debate invitation. You do not need to make everyone agree with your priorities. You do not need permission to protect your peace. You do need honesty. If someone depends on you in a real and serious way, speak with care. If you are responsible for children, work commitments, or a partner who deserves clear communication, do not use healing as an excuse for abandonment. A true retreat is ethical. It does not create unnecessary harm. It does not manipulate. It does not punish. It simply refuses to keep sacrificing the self. This is where you learn a difficult truth. Some people only know how to relate to your old persona. They may pull away when you become clearer. They may prefer the version of you who never said no. They may complain that you are distant because they were accustomed to unlimited access. Let them have their opinion. Carl Jung understood that becoming an individual requires separation from the collective pull. Jung did not mean you become superior to others. He meant you become responsible for your own inner authority. Your life cannot be directed entirely by the emotional weather of the people around you. You can love someone and disappoint them. You can be grateful and still say no. You can be compassionate and still leave the conversation. You can forgive someone and still stop giving them access. You can be connected without being consumed. That is maturity. Not becoming hard, becoming clear. Your affirmation for this movement is, I return to the world without abandoning the person I became in silence. Now see how these 5 movements work together. You close the gates so your energy stops leaking. You remove the mask so you can recognize your real face. You meet the shadow so what you have denied no longer controls you from the dark. You build the inner house so your transformation has a structure. You return with boundaries so the world cannot immediately pull you back into the old role. This is not a quick fix. It is a relationship with yourself. Carl Jung understood that individuation is not a weekend project. Jung saw it as a lifelong process, a gradual movement toward wholeness. You will not remove every mask in one season. You will not understand every dream immediately. You will not face every shadow without resistance. But you can begin, and beginning changes the direction of a life. You may notice that after a period of conscious withdrawal, your voice sounds different. Not louder, necessarily. Truer. You may notice that you no longer need to explain yourself so much. You may notice that the things which once triggered panic now reveal information. You may notice that some relationships deepen because they can survive your honesty. You may notice that others fall away because they depended on your self-erasure. Let that teach you. Not every loss is a mistake. Some losses are evidence that you stopped lying. Carl Jung believed that a person becomes more real not by becoming universally acceptable, but by becoming inwardly aligned. Jung understood that the path to the self can make you feel separate at times because it asks you to stop taking your identity entirely from the crowd. But you are not alone. There are people all over the world who are tired of performing strength while collapsing privately. There are people who are learning that silence is not emptiness. There are people who are closing the gates, facing the shadow, and building an inner life nobody can take from them. We are more numerous than we know, and every person who chooses consciousness makes it easier for another person to choose it too. When you stop living only for approval, you give someone else permission to stop. When you set a boundary without hatred, you show someone else that love does not require self-destruction. When you make space for your grief, you make the world safer for honesty. When you pursue your real work, your real art, your real calling, you become proof that a person can survive being misunderstood. That may be part of your purpose, not to be universally liked, not to remain available to everyone, but to become so inwardly honest that your presence carries less performance and more truth. Drop 777 in the comments. I commit to becoming whole, even when growth asks me to stand alone. Write it, and remember, your solitude can be a sanctuary, not a sentence. Here is the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be visible to everyone, you may finally become visible to yourself. The moment you stop explaining your every move, your life may begin to make more sense. The moment you step away from the crowd, you may hear the voice that was always trying to guide you. The moment you disappear for a while, you may return more present than you have ever been. Carl Jung understood that the greatest meeting of your life is the meeting with your own depths. Jung knew that you can travel the world and still avoid yourself. You can build a career, a reputation, a family, a body, a platform, a routine, and still never truly enter your own inner life. But the door is open now. Not when you feel completely ready. Not when everyone approves. Not when fear disappears. Now, you do not need to have the entire plan. You need one honest act. Turn off the noise for an hour. Take the walk. Write the truth you keep editing. Say no to the request that makes your body go tense. Rest without earning it. Stop calling yourself selfish for needing space. Stop calling yourself lost when you are actually in the process of finding what was buried. There is a version of you waiting beyond the performance. Not a perfect version. Not a fearless version. A whole version. A version who can feel grief without drowning in it. Who can feel anger without becoming destructive. Who can love without disappearing inside another person. Who can be ambitious without turning achievement into self-worth. And who can enter a room without begging the room to define them. Carl Jung's work reminds us that wholeness does not come from eliminating every contradiction. Jung taught that the psyche contains opposites, and growth asks you to hold them consciously. Strength and tenderness, solitude and connection, ambition and rest, reason and mystery, individuality and belonging. You do not have to choose between being loving and having boundaries. You do not have to choose between being visible and being private. You do not have to choose between serving others and serving your own becoming. You can disappear for a while and still be a good person. You can become quieter and still be deeply alive. You can leave what drains you without becoming cruel. You can outgrow a role without hating the people who knew you in it. This is your permission, not permission from me. Permission from the part of you that has been waiting patiently beneath the noise. The part that knows. The part that has always known. It knows when you are shrinking. It knows when you are pretending. It knows when your life is asking for a new form. And it knows that the old identity may have to dissolve before the new one can stand. Like a forest after fire, your life may look empty for a while. Blackened ground, silence, no familiar shape left standing. But beneath that ground, seeds are waking. The fire did not only destroy, it cleared what could no longer grow. Your disappearance may be like that. Not an ending, a clearing. Not a rejection of the world, a refusal to keep betraying your own soul for it. So disappear with intention. Disappear into your journal. Disappear into your healing. Disappear into the work you keep postponing. Disappear into the long walk where your thoughts finally settle. Disappear into the quiet where your deepest self can speak. Then return. Return with eyes that have seen through the illusion. Return with a heart that no longer confuses attention with love. Return with a voice that does not need to shout, because it is no longer lying. Return as someone who knows that their inner life is sacred. And when people ask what happened to you, you do not have to give them a perfect explanation. You can simply smile, because some transformations are too deep to explain while they are still becoming. Drop 9,999 in the comments right now. I am ready to disappear from the noise and awaken to myself. Write it, feel it, and let this be the moment you stop postponing your return. Maybe nobody will understand your quiet season. Maybe some people will call it distance. Maybe they will assume you are lost because they cannot see the work happening beneath the surface. Let them wonder. Carl Jung understood that the path inward cannot be lived for you by anyone else. Jung knew that no crowd can enter the place where you must finally meet yourself. You do not need to vanish forever. You only need to be gone long enough to remember who you are without the noise. Close the gates. Remove the mask. Meet the shadow. Build the inner house. Return with boundaries. And when the world asks for the old version of you, pause before you answer, because you may no longer live there. Share this with someone who has been carrying too much noise for too long. They may not need another demand. They may need permission to come home to themselves. Like a forest after fire, your life may look empty for a while. Blackened ground, silence, no familiar shape left standing. But beneath that ground, seeds are waking. The fire did not only destroy, it cleared what could no longer grow. Your disappearance may be like that. Not an ending, a clearing. Not a rejection of the world, a refusal to keep betraying your own soul for it. So disappear with intention. Disappear into your journal. Disappear into your healing. Disappear into the work you keep postponing. Disappear into the long walk where your thoughts finally settle. Disappear into the quiet where your deepest self can speak. Then return. Return with eyes that have seen through the illusion. Return with a heart that no longer confuses attention with love. Return with a voice that does not need to shout, because it is no longer lying. Return as someone who knows that their inner life is sacred. And when people ask what happened to you, you do not have to give them a perfect explanation. You can simply smile, because some transformations are too deep to explain while they are still becoming. Drop 9,999 in the comments right now. I am ready to disappear from the noise and awaken to myself. Write it, feel it, and let this be the moment you stop postponing your return. Maybe nobody will understand your quiet season. Maybe some people will call it distance. Maybe they will assume you are lost because they cannot see the work happening beneath the surface. Let them wonder. Carl Jung understood that the path inward cannot be lived for you by anyone else. Jung knew that no crowd can enter the place where you must finally meet yourself. You do not need to vanish forever. You only need to be gone long enough to remember who you are without the noise. Close the gates. Remove the mask. Meet the shadow. Build the inner house. Return with boundaries. And when the world asks for the old version of you, pause before you answer, because you may no longer live there. Share this with someone who has been carrying too much noise for too long. They may not need another demand. They may need permission to come home to themselves.